Welcome, everyone, to Say What? With me here, of course, is Jesson Bradshaw, our CEO.
It's me.
Yay. Yeah, this is unprecedented times. I'm trying to be really happy, but this is tough.
Well, I think it's the uncertainty, right? It's one thing if you know, hey, we're going to be dealing with this for this period of time where we can get sort of mentally prepared for everything that's going to come down the road. But I think, for those of us that have little kids at home,
right?
It's just, the memes I think keep people sane to a certain extent. But yeah, I think it's really the uncertainty and some of the fear of the unknown, I think is what's, at least for me personally, that's probably what weighs on me more than dealing with, any disruptions in my day-to-day life.
Well, and it's been interesting and kind of eerie when you walk into the office. Just things are just a little unsettling right now.
Oh, it's weird when it's a ghost town. It reminds me a lot of some of the post-hurricane stuff we've had here in Houston with everyone evacuating, and it's a little weird. I sort of half expect to see some tumbleweeds
go
rolling
down the
streams, the streets sometime soon.
It's true. Well, we are practicing social distancing.
For sure.
Yeah,
it's as close to 6 feet as we can get.
That's exactly right. With that said, the outbreak has left a lot of Texans really curious about, how am I going to afford my electricity bill? The other thing that they're wondering, does it affect the electricity? Could the electricity go down? I mean, could we have blackouts, that type of thing? So let's talk about that first. Our electricity isn't going to shut off anytime soon.
No, I mean, I wouldn't expect that to happen. If anything, right now, I think what we're going to see is that, at least on the commercial and maybe some of the industrial facilities, those demands will be decreasing. And I think we're starting to see some of that materialize already in the day-to-day stuff. Now, of course, there's an offset to that, which is, folks are at home and they're consuming a lot more electricity in their homes than they would normally.
Usage, the load.
Yeah, and it's interesting, commercial properties, whether it's a strip center or if, you have a real industrial facility, they might work shifts, so their demand is pretty consistent across, the course of the day or consistent across daytime hours.
That's
if
true.
You have a strip mall and folks are coming in and out of the stores.
Right.
Air conditioners shut down overnight and they pick back up in the morning. So residential consumption's a lot different than that. So it can be interesting. I think it's definitely created some, learn on the fly kind of situation for the way the overall fleet in Texas is dispatched to meet the demand requirements. And it's going to look a lot more like what we see in normal periods of time, like weekends. So weekends those overall loads tend to be lower on a Saturday or a Sunday. These should be on a weather adjusted basis even lower than that because most of these businesses are still not running on the weekends.
That's right.
But the demand shape is quite a bit different on the weekends than it is on the weekday as a general rule. And I think that we're seeing more and more of that as time goes on. I think the big risk that we're looking at is over time is really we don't know how pervasive all this infection will end up being for folks. So, I only know what I read. And, mercifully, it looks like the vast majority of people that contract this illness have pretty mild symptoms.
80% so far.
But yeah, whatever the numbers are.
Right.
But it seems as though that's sort of the positive news, I guess, 4 out of 5 people.
Right.
But the issue that we'll be dealing with, if you think about critical infrastructure, and as I think specifically about the power side is, we've been able to automate a lot of those systems, but we still have to have people that are there. So I know there's been some talk in the industry about whether or not you isolate the plant operators and, have them actually living out of these plants. So some of the newer equipment is you're able to run it with far fewer people. So the good news is,
but you still have to physically be there.
You still have to have people that are there. Yeah. And so, we're going to get into issues right now. Like this time of year is a time of year when there's a lot of maintenance that's being done to a lot of the equipment. So I don't know how any of this is impacting. I suspect there's not a ton of impact right now, but as the logistics of being able to get spare parts and other kinds of things starts to slow down, it may just end up, I don't think it's going to have a material effect in terms of what we're dealing with, given what we know today. But yeah, there's definitely some other considerations that may or not sort of front and center. But I think that, our electricity infrastructure is one of the most important pieces of infrastructure that we deal with, electricity and water being of utmost importance really from our modern way of life. So I'm fairly convinced that no matter what ends up happening, there'll be adequate resources that are put to bear to make sure that we have these ongoing supplies. The good news is it's not happening where it's not like hospital beds.
Right.
The demand is not anticipated to outstrip our supply. So all things being equal, I think we'll be okay.
Also, a lot of people are worried about their pocketbook, clearly and understandably. During the state of disaster, there is a moratorium on disconnects in Texas. So talk about what that actually means. What does the moratorium actually mean for the average consumer?
Sure. Well, there's been a process in place for a very long time with in the statutes and the way the rules are written in Texas. I'm sure it's true in other parts of the country as well, but it's particularly important for us in the competitive market. We see disconnect moratoriums almost every year. Usually the disconnect moratoriums happen where you can't disconnect someone for non-payment if it's 100 degrees outside. There's some specific criteria of heat index and the number of days on heat index. So it's a health and safety kind of an issue. And so the state steps in and they basically tell the retailers, we get it, you have the right to disconnect folks for non-payment, but in this particular situation, because of circumstances, we're going to go ahead and not allow you to enforce that. So that's what that disconnect moratorium is. It's done through the wires companies, since all the retailers have to have the wires companies initiate and terminate service. So this was put in place on an emergency basis. It's been rolled. The dates of where that's ending, continue to roll out there, but nothing's really changing in our circumstances. So right now there's a big debate of how to fund all this. Right. So, but the most important thing is, there's so much uncertainty with folks and with them being home and not knowing, it's absolutely going to be devastating to a number of people, losing jobs, having hours cut back and everything else. I think the state and the Public Utilities Commission has realized that the last thing anyone needs to worry about for right now is their lights going out. Now, there is a cost to that, and so it remains to be seen. It may very well be that there's a rider. In the past, we had a program in Texas called Light Up, and so Light Up was it doesn't exist anymore, but it was one where all the retailers through TDSP charges, they collected extra funds, or you could contribute into those funds, and those funds would go to help make payments for folks that were economically disadvantaged. Okay. So I think what we'll see today is it's very likely that we'll see a surcharge make its way into everybody's bills to help offset some of this new cost that is going to be there, just because some folks just can't pay their electricity bills.
I was going to say, this moratorium does not absolve them from paying that bill, and I'm afraid some people might think, I don't have to pay the electricity bill. That's not the case.
No, they're still going to seek payment. No, at the end of the day, if you don't have it, you don't have it. So I'm not sure what actually can be done in that regard. So it's very fluid, so we'll figure out what happens. I think generally speaking, folks will prioritize what they're paying. And so I think that most people want to make sure they have electricity, and obviously
it's a necessity.
It's an emergency condition. Obviously nothing is normal right now, and that's what we're dealing with, but I don't know how long that will last for. So if folks are banking on that, we just need to be aware that it may not go on for forever.
So the other thing too is a lot of people think, well, will I be penalized for late payments or that type of thing? If you're working with your electricity provider, 9 times out of 10, if you have some type of payment arrangement, you're going to be okay.
Yeah, they know what's happening. There's I think actually the temporary order that was promulgated a couple of days ago that got sent out did not allow for late fees either. Now I might be mistaken about that. So I think some of those late fees and those things were waived as well. So it's super fluid. Yeah. What will end up happening? It's like everything else. It's like everyone's trying to figure it out on the fly. The goal is to make sure that we do not put people in the dark just owing to their circumstances.
No question.
And so I think, the Public Utilities Commission, along with the providers and along with the TDSPs, have gotten this right. The last thing that we need is to have that being a major crisis for people, particularly with children at home or folks that
They don't need the
extra
stress.
stuff.
They really
That's
don't need
not,
the stress.
Not for the time. And
Yeah.
we'll figure out, how to allocate the costs associated with this stuff later.
Right.
But generally speaking, I think that's right. I think, if you have an issue or you're going to have an issue, I think trying to work something through with your provider is almost all of them would rather work with you than not get paid anything.
Right.
Everyone needs to keep in mind, though, if you end up entering into a payment arrangement with a retail electricity provider, they can place what they call a switch hold on your account, which means that while you still have a deferred balance or you have a payment arrangement with them, monies that you owe them, they can prevent you from switching to another provider.
So you can't run away from that debt.
That's right. So that's one of the balancing factors to having someone defer what you need to pay them, and that's in normal times. Now, I don't know how any of this stuff will play out in these circumstances, but that's the way it has historically worked.
Again, fluid. That's
right.
And of course, if you're an Energy Ogre member and you have to make some type of payment arrangement, please call us. We can help you through walk you through that as well.
We'll do our absolute best to navigate that for you.
So the retail electricity providers, they're facing additional bad debt. Explain what that means on the big scope of the electricity industry.
Well, it's just that. It's what we've been talking about. It's not getting paid by their customers. And so now we've got to figure out, from a fairness perspective, if you're running a business and you have the government tell you that you can't, if you're running Starbucks and you have the government tell you that you have to keep providing coffee for free, you're wearing that exposure, even if it's the right thing to do. There is a cost associated with that. So that's a big concern that, at least the way our market was restructured here, is that each one of the retail electricity providers, unlike other states, they're responsible for sending out their bills and for collecting their bills. And in some other states, they subsidize this, or the wires company sends those bills out and they guarantee the retailers that they get a certain percentage of what's billed.
Yeah.
That doesn't work that way here. That's why a lot of the credit criteria and the thresholding is different from retailer to retailer, because they're making the decision of what kind of credit exposure that they can handle within the way the rule is written, right? So
it's a lot more complicated than people just think.
It is.
They don't see the big picture.
Sure. And I think if the business, I think a lot of people tend to think that there's huge amounts of margin in selling electricity on some of these things. And oftentimes that's not really the case. I think just because of the way the wholesale market works behind the scenes and the cost to serve a residential profile consumption, it can be expensive, especially like with what we saw last year. It's hard to hedge it, and it's hard to do some of those things. So these businesses rightly are concerned. We think that we don't want any retailer to make an outsized margin. We want them to make a reasonable margin.
Yeah, they're in business to make money.
Right. What's reasonable is in the eye of the beholder, right?
True.
So we think the ones that are the most efficient and they have their processes down, they have better hedging tools, they do a better job of minimizing their advertising costs. The ones that run their businesses most efficiently should be able to make a good margin. And I think all of us as consumers in Texas want to see that happening, because we don't want to it's great to have competition, but if we can choose between 3 providers, is that really competition? So we want a robust market, right? And so there has to be a reasonable margin in there for there to be a robust market. But our job is to try to keep everyone in the lower cost portion of that at all times.
Good stuff. Anything else you want to say in regards to, keeping the lights on during this pandemic, or people paying bills, not being able to pay bills? Anything else in regards to that?
Yeah, I think for the time being, like everything else, I think you can reduce your overall cost by just being mindful about what you're consuming, right? So even just simple things, I know some things that we just don't even really think about, especially as we're starting to get into warmer weather now. Our air conditioners are going to start running again. So the absolute amount of what our electricity spend should start increasing, just because our demand will start increasing. So there's some good times for us to go through. I know a lot of people probably have done this already, but you would be shocked at how much electricity demand is saved by just swapping over to LED light bulbs. Mm-hmm. It's a huge. I don't think a lot of people know that, but maybe we're busy running out the door to work and back and forth.
It's not a priority, right?
Yeah, but today, if you're stuck staring at the walls, then maybe it's easy to order some of those online and have them delivered to you. Another thing I think people forget about is, and I know that, thank goodness I have a new thermostat that sort of reminds me, but changing the filters on your air conditioning equipment, especially as we're transitioning to this time, a lot of people think, okay, whatever, it's maybe a dirty filter, but when you have that dirty filter, or it may not look dirty, but it's been there long enough. So what happens is, as those filters start to they pick up more and more stuff in them, especially if you're home more, right? And
dirt and particles, that's right.
Sloughing off and all that. So what happens with that is it restricts the air flow. And so the air conditioning system is trying to meet that temperature. And so if you're compromising the amount of flow, then what's going to happen is that equipment is not anywhere near as efficient as it should be.
It's working harder, right?
Right. So it will if the flow is good, then it can get to its temperature quickly.
Yeah.
If the flow is bad, it's going to run 5% longer or 10% longer to hit that temperature. So you're just increasing your electricity consumption for no good reason.
So dirty filters like running uphill against the wind.
A little bit like that.
Okay.
It's just a simple thing to do.
Yeah,
and
sure.
I think it's, and some folks change them. I guess it depends on if you have pets or whatever have you, but every 3 to 6 months, it does make a big difference.
Yeah.
Something that's easy for us to overlook. Just don't think about it a ton.
That's right.
I think for me, I've got 2 teenage boys, so I think if I could just get them from opening the refrigerator and standing in front of it for like 5 minutes, I'd probably save about 5% of my electricity bill just by reducing that cost alone.
Just put a lock on it. That's all. That's like all I do. So. That's good stuff. All right. Well, I think we've tackled enough on that for today. I mean, at the end of the day, our lights are going to stay on, and there is a moratorium. You still will have to pay the bill, but if you are an Energy Ogre member, please call us. We'll help you through this and walk you through your options. So, all right, Jesson, as always, we appreciate your time.
All the way over here.
I know.
So
it was
actually,
a
this time
long
it
trip.
was.
It was a long trip, actually.
Yeah,
so.
Today's unlike normal days. You're shambling over.
That's for sure.
Desk, so.
All right. Well, if you have any questions or comments that you want addressed by Jesson, please leave them in the comments down below. In the meantime, stay cool, be kind, and do great things because, of course, it is the Ogre way.